This is our presentation on the Iran hostage crisis, and we will be doing an analysis on newsworthiness. Newsworthiness is defined by 12 factors, determining how interesting an event is to the general public. There are 12 factors that influence the newsworthiness of an event, which include frequency, threshold, unambiguity, meaningfulness, consonance, unexpectedness, continuity, composition, relevance of elite nations, relevance of elite people, personalization, and negativity. These terms were coined as news values by Johann Galtung and Mari Rouge, and they determine the newsworthiness of an event. In our presentation, we are analyzing the personalization, elite nations, continuity, meaningfulness, and unexpectedness in both US and UK news, as those are the most relevant news values in the media regarding the Iranian hostage crisis. Personalization of a news event refers to whether an event can be contextualized in personal terms, and meaningfulness of an event is important because it asks reporters if the event is relevant to their audience. The next factor in newsworthiness is continuity, which means that a story that is already on the news will gain more inertia. And elite nations are relevant in newsworthiness because the more dominant a country is, the more they will be reported on. Finally, the unexpectedness of an event is important because these events that surprise audiences are reported on the most.
For our case study, we chose the Iranian hostage crisis. The crisis began on November 4th, 1979, and lasted for 444 days. During this time, roughly 52 American citizens were held hostage by a group of militarized Iranian college students who were supporting the Iran Revolution. Tensions had risen to drastic rates after the Iranian Shah Pahlavi fled Iran in early 1979 and headed to the United States to seek cancer treatment. The Shah gained American support by preventing the nationalization of Iran's oil industry. Americans providing treatment to the overthrown Shah angered many Iranians, which led to the uprising militant attack on the US Embassy. President Carter was not able to end the crisis diplomatically. However, after negotiations between Iran and the United States, the hostages were released after 444 days.
Now we will be analyzing our theory in relation to our case study. We are comparing American coverage of this crisis to the United Kingdom's coverage. Regarding the coverage from American media, there are 5 key newsworthiness factors that we will be examining. The first factor is personalization. Throughout the coverage of the Iranian hostage crisis in American media, personalization of the hostages has been on the forefront. Descriptions of the living conditions and victims, specifically one from Elizabeth Montage, a secretary at the embassy who was released in the early stages of the confinement period, describes the volatile ups and downs of the isolating and uncomfortable conditions. The New York Times also conducted interviews with emotional family members of the hostages who were pleased for their return home, drove the personalization of the victims.
The next factor is elite nations. The newsworthiness of this conflict is in part because of the country and the people that were involved. At this time, the United States represents a powerful and somewhat untouchable country in the world. In other words, an elite nation, which made this event particularly surprising due to the fact that the victims were citizens of the United States. The next factor is continuity. This crisis lasted for 444 days, so continuity of coverage made this very newsworthy. Media viewers wanted to hear updates on the situation and progression of the situation of the hostages. Similar to COVID in the modern media, this event was given regular coverage and updates. The next factor is meaningfulness. The Iranian hostage crisis was covered daily in US media outlets because of the relevancy to its viewers. Seeing that the victims of this conflict were American citizens, just like the viewers themselves, this conflict was given massive amounts of coverage. Viewers were more personally invested in this story as they could relate more to the victims. The last factor is unexpectedness. This event was very unexpected and therefore more newsworthy. Generally, events that are out of the ordinary, such as this one, receive more attention from the media. And that rings true with the Iranian hostage crisis, which was a surprising and unique event.
The news coverage from the United Kingdom was limited in comparison to the United States coverage. There was less personalization in the British media as the hostages were United States citizens as opposed to British. The crisis held news value to the British media because America is an elite nation, similar to the UK. The continuity factor was initially lacking due to limited British involvement. However, it increased dramatically surrounding the events of the Iranian embassy takeover in England, in which 6 Iranian gunmen demanded the release of 91 prisoners in Iran just 6 months after the initial seizure of American hostages in Iran. The Iranian embassy siege embodied both meaningful and unexpected newsworthiness factors for the United Kingdom citizens, and because of these shared experiences, both countries had a powerful alliance against a common enemy. Although the Iranian embassy siege is different from the crisis we are analyzing, we felt it was relevant to reference as it contributed to the newsworthiness of the Iranian hostage crisis in the United Kingdom media.
In a comparison of the media coverage of the two countries, one can see that the American media outlets covered by the Iranian hostage crisis much more than the UK media outlets. This is for obvious reasons such as meaningfulness, seeing as the victims of the crisis were Americans and it was at the American embassy. The increase of newsworthiness of this crisis allowed for Americans to become invested in the safety of their fellow citizens. This created the rally around the flag effect, which was most important to make Americans aware of political tension in order to gain support for the government and their military decisions. This phenomenon elevated feelings in American media, but not British, which is yet another reason the crisis was much more newsworthy in US media. That's all we have for today. Thanks for watching, everyone.